What are the greatest lengths you've seen someone go to in order to get laid? In high school I stayed over at my girlfriend's place because her parents went on an overnight trip. They were coming back the next morning, so I left around 3 AM. This was in the dead of Canadian winter, and with wind chill, was around -45 degrees Celsius or -49 degrees Fahrenheit. At the time I didn't have a car, so I waited for the bus for over 20 minutes as it was a night schedule. I was not prepared for this ordeal. I didn't have winter boots, I was wearing jeans, and I did not have gloves. By the time I got on the bus and to my stop I was in pain. I still had a 15-minute walk to my house and my toes started to tingle, so I ran. I was running thinking, if I didn't I might lose my toes or fingers, and when I got home I jumped into my bed with a winter jacket and wrapped myself up till my body regained some life. Still got laid though, so I would say it was worth it. I flew to Canada to lose my virginity. I live in the southern US. A cousin of mine flew from New York to Houston, then we drove 4 hours to Dallas, just so he could try to smash a girl. He didn't. Friend of a friend rode 50 miles by bike to get laid for the first time. Took him like 6 hours or some shit. He smashed, probably sweaty and smelling like shit, and then rode the 6 hours back. He's a f***ing legend. Had a mate from Alaska who fell in love with a hooker in Amsterdam. He spent almost his entire travel savings seeing her. She eventually refused to see him anymore and gave him quite a talking to, trying to put things into perspective for him. This dumb kid I knew drove all the way to Florida to bail some girl out of jail so that her parents wouldn't find out she had been arrested. It was an 18-hour drive, and when he got her out of jail she asked him to pick up her boyfriend. They drove home together all the way back to Indiana in complete silence. Also, it was me. You drove 4 hours here and brought beer? I'm Chris Hansen from Dataline NBC. I had a real piece of junk car. My girl wanted me to come over because there was a blizzard and we could keep warm together alone. But the drive was far and my car had many issues. I did drive through the blizzard, but my front wheel literally rolled off and I got stuck in a snowdrift. I took out my stuff, took off the plate, put it in my backpack, and walked the last 8 or so miles. Worth it. Stay in a terrible relationship because of consistent sex. I stopped at a highway rest stop south of Cleveland on a bitter cold night in the middle of winter. 2 guys all bundled up pulled in on a little street bike like Dumb and Dumber. They were coming from western Pennsylvania going to Kentucky. One guy had a girlfriend there, and the other guy was hoping to mount her friend. Pre-internet. A friend of mine went from being an atheist to a full-on Jehovah Witness. He was a virgin, met this girl, who was a Jehovah Witness. She gave him sweet non-stop puss for a couple of months, and then cut him off cold turkey, and told him she had just realized how they would never end up together, because her family would never accept it. The rest is history. R.I.P. Pablo. 12 years later, you are still missed. Spanish disco in the late 90s. Really cute girl asks me if I want a cigarette. Now, I don't smoke. But I respond, sure, like I've been smoking forever. Ended up smoking 4 cigarettes. The girl leaves. I then puked my dinner on the sidewalk outside of the club. What a loser. One guy I know became a security guard of a girls only hostel, hoping he'd get laid. Apparently he quit with severe blue balls. A friend met this girl online and asked me to come with him on a trip up north to meet her and hang out with her for the weekend. My friend was in a band who had a show the night before we were supposed to leave, and the plan was to meet at his place at 4 AM to drive up and meet this girl around noon. Due to the show running super late, we didn't get back to the house to drop off equipment until around 3 AM. We left at 4 still having no sleep and made it to the town around 11 and had to wait outside of an apartment building for her and her friends to get back from being out. They got there around 1. We still hadn't slept and it was starting to wear on us. Finally she shows up and they meet. I'm awkwardly standing off to the side with her friends trying not to pass out and making small talk, and instead of them going off to hang out together he talked me into going with them all to some lake to hang out and drink. Around 9 PM we leave the lake and head to another house for a party. Friend has been drinking all day and starts taking shots the second we get to the house. 11 PM comes around and I haven't seen my friend or the girl in a few hours and I assume something has happened and they are off in a room somewhere doing the gross. The feel around the trip was they were hitting it off great and that something would happen. Before we left the next day, I go inside to grab an energy drink cause at this point I still haven't slept, and I find my friend slouched in the middle of 4 people on a couch complaining about how we drove up all this way and this girl was basically ignoring him. Take him outside and we sit down at a table and he tells me about how she hasn't talked to him the entire time we were at the house and how he wanted to leave. I get up to go see if we are blocked in, and when I come back to tell him we are good to leave I see him puke all over himself and he just starts sobbing. I take him to the truck and clean him off and take off looking for a hotel. This is a small college town and I can't find a hotel. To save my fucking life, it was either sleep in the car with my vomit stained friend, drive a town over and get a hotel, or just drive home because I'm 100% done with this trip. 6 hours later I'm pulling up to his house, running on no sleep for the last 40+ hours, and tell him to go inside, that I'm gonna take his truck home and I'll bring it back tomorrow. He zombies his way in and I go home. I get a frantic call from him at around noon and he's freaking out thinking we'd never made the trip, and afterwards he apologized for dragging me along and to this day still brings it up as his that's how far I'll go even though nothing happened and the only person that got that weekend was my sleep schedule. Had a friend once who stopped being ultra religious when he got to college. Then he met a hardcore Christian girl and jumped back on his ultra religious zealot bullshit just so he could smash. Never found out if he did. One of my best friends back in middle school broke out of his parents' house, stole his older brother's car, then drove illegally, we were 15 at the time so no license, across town where he broke into / given access to his at the time GF's parents' house to do the deed. Then made it back home without anyone knowing. I guess what made it special, if I remember correctly, was the night they both lost their V card. My friend, who was an avid hunter / lover of BBQ, went vegan for 6 months to smash this girl, and it ended up being terrible, like crying hysterically to us because he couldn't believe how much time he invested in her. He cooked what amounted to an episode of epic mealtime after the breakup, and having not had any meat for over half a year spent the night puking because he ate probably about 5 pounds of meat. A cousin of mine flew out from Tennessee to Wisconsin to see a girl from an online game he's been chatting with. I traveled with him. He went on about their conversations of wishing they could see their faces, getting married, and of course, he took these illusions too far, in hindsight, but he said he'd pay for my ticket, so I couldn't resist seeing the cringe first, and the location was given through their online chat, for whatever reason, and he knocked on her door. Let's just say that the conversation the two had outside was not romantic in the slightest. Not as drastic as some of the stories in this thread, but when I was a teenager, my first sexual relationship was with a girl who had huge tits and a ferocious sexual appetite. When I say this girl did everything and f***ed my brains out, I mean she really f***ed my brains out. We moved 6 or 7 miles further away from her when I was 17. She'd text me at 2 AM on a school night or whatever, asking me to come up to her place. I'd walk up to her house in the rain, snow, and even a hailstorm of fire if it happened, just to get laid. And I mean briskly walk there, f*** around with her until 5 AM sometimes, walk home and pretty much get ready for school that day. I was with this girl for 6 years. In the beginning I used to have to sneak in and out of her house, thinking I was all sly, that her parents never caught me. Then one night years later, we were drunk at a family BBQ and her dad goes, "I know you think you're clever sneaking in and out of my house through the garage, but I'm up late at night in my office and I can see you sneaking in every time." He really put the fear of God into me with the face he made and his tone. After that though, her parents eventually stopped caring. We were together for so long, I practically lived there near the end. Went to a bar to meet friends for a few light drinks, as some of them are doing a charity run that night that ends as the sun rises. Get introduced to a friend of a friend and all goes well. We all end up very drunk and in a nightclub. Nightclub ends and she comes back to my house and we've moved to the bedroom when all of a sudden she realizes she was supposed to be doing that charity run and starts panicking. Seeing this all swiftly falling apart before my eyes, I too panic. I suggest we run it together. Bearing in mind we are now both very drunk and I'm unfathomably unfit. We make our way towards the starting area, but accidentally end up at a part of the run that is only illuminated by lines of candles on either side of the path, which is beside the sea. It was very romantic, so we decided to stop a minute and enjoy the place we had found ourselves in. We began to kiss again until we notice a stampede of people holding flashlights running towards us, and her panic sets in again. This run means a lot to her. We leave the path of the runners so as not to be in the way and decide on our course of action. We are still about 1.5 kilometers away from the starting point of the 6k run. Again, seeing her slipping through my fingers, we decide to run to the start and then run the course. Reminder, I'm terribly unfit and she is very into sport. We begin to running quickly. Thankfully the effects of all the alcohol hit us both, but in very different ways. She is slowed and tired from the drink, but I'm now using it to ignore every part of my screaming body which hasn't ran in years. We alternate running and walking to make it around. She says she is so glad I was willing to run this with her as it means a lot, and we hold hands running in the final 2k. The end is in sight, we are almost done, and back to my apartment. Wheezing and do you have an inhaler? She begins having an asthma attack. I ring our friend who introduced us, who is also doing the race and I know also has asthma. She arrives and saves the day, says she had been trying to get through to both of us before the race, but knew we were together so wasn't worried. Decides the best thing for her to do is come stay with her for the night. The next day I'm completely immobile. My body has seized up after doing more exercise in one night than in the previous few years. I decide to give the girl from last night a text to see if she wanted to meet up and go for food or something. Turns out she was only visiting from another part of the country for a few days and was now en route home. We have never met in person since, and she now has a boyfriend. Met a girl at a bar, brought her back to my place, about to do the nasty, end up running 6k for charity that night drunk, because she really wanted to. She had an asthma attack and had to stay with a friend, returned home to another part of the country the next day. Never met in person again.